Good morning, everybody. It's 11:03. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name is Frederick Martin, and I'm responsible for the channel here at Arctic Benchmark. And I work with a number of our partners here. This morning we have Lester Wong, who is the Director of Sales for Ontario for AppD. And we have Dave Briand. Dave is the Chief Operating Officer for Arctic, and has between the two of them have spent many years in the systems and integration space. I know Lester has been 22 years at Cisco, and I know Dave's spent a number of years in this same industry as well. Without further ado, I know it's going to be a tag team between Lester and Dave. But I'm going to have Lester kick this event off. Lester, thank you.
Yeah.
To you.
Thanks a lot, Fred. Folks, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend an hour here with us, Cisco and Arctic here, to talk a bit about full stack observability. So, like Fred said, I've been Cisco almost 23 years. And actually, I was just kind of thinking this morning, looking back, I was thinking 2001, I was at the Summit of the Americas. And, there was protesters outside. George W. had just kind of landed. And we were inside setting up the network for the reporters. It was kind of HQ Central. And I remember the observability, or actually the visibility tool that we had back then was a product called What's Up Gold. And all we saw was a bunch of kind of computers and the phone systems that we had set up. And it was basically really simple, right? Was it up or was it down, right? So if the icon was green, it was up, and was red, it was down. It's basically just an ICMP, a ping sweep, to see what was up and down. I was kind of thinking, 22 years later, or 21 years later, how things have really evolved and changed, right? So, today we're here to talk about observability. But when most folks think about, Cisco App Dynamics, you guys are probably thinking APM, right? Application Performance Monitoring. And, I'm here to tell you guys today that, the era of the traditional APM is really quickly coming to an end. It's being swallowed up, right, by this observability superset. And, I'm going to explain to you guys why and why it's important to think about observability. So really the movement from APM into observability is really being driven by a bunch of, macro market events. And, you guys will know a lot of this in your environments today. You guys have probably seen this change throughout the last, especially accelerated over the past few years. So if you think about number one is that, compute is being massively distributed, right? As organizations are moving more towards like microservices architectures, to maintain speed and agility, the ideal thing to do is kind of break up applications, break up code, right, into immutable chunks and have them all, and they're spread all over the place. And, to make it worse on the infrastructure side, if you think about like traditionally, maybe a couple of mainframes have turned into, 500 servers, turned into 2,000 blades, turned into 20,000 VMs, into 100,000 clusters, is that like the compute space and the applications are now all over the place, and the amount of just endpoints and nodes is massively like exploding, right? Becoming extremely complex. Another trend kind of closely related to that is that the amount of tools necessary to maintain visibility and all that is also exploding. I mean, more often than not, we're hearing this more and more from our customers, right? Especially from our customers' leadership. The question that they're asking their teams is, what exactly is your tooling strategy, right? And number three, digital transformation is no longer an option. It is the business today. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where I remember like our customers, I hear about teams, right? Tiger teams of people being put together to talk about digital transformation. And really it was a way, right, to kind of stave off disruption, to calm the waters. How are we slowly going to turn into a digital company? Whereas today, really the technology is the business. So it's no longer really an option. And more often than not, we're hearing from CIOs, the question they're asking themselves and their team is, how do I become more disruptive, right? The more disruptive I can be, the more we're able to maintain and drive innovation and really grow the business and really be relevant to our customers. Closely related to that, and I know a big topic for what we're talking today is around change, right? We're in an era right now of unshackled change. If you think about from a DevOps perspective, I think years ago, like when we talked about change, it was something that we wanted to consolidate, right? Something that we wanted to minimize because it was complicated, it's stressful. But today, like change is being embraced, right? When your business is really being driven by technology, right? We need to go and maintain that kind of pace of innovation. So change is being actively encouraged. As a matter of fact, the question of, how quickly are we releasing is actually now becoming more of a metric of how mature your organization is, right? So there's a couple of other things. At the same time as innovation is being pushed, what we're seeing is that the old legacy monolithic applications are still not going away, right? As organizations are focused more and more on, going to the cloud and driving innovation there, less focus and priority is actually being made at deprecating existing applications. So when we reach out and we talk to our enterprise customers and our large customers, we see a spread of different environments. I mean, as an example, you'd be surprised at how much mainframe is still out there, but maybe like something kind of more relevant for the audience here is, how many of you guys still have on-premise data centers? Right now, how are you guys doing on your movement to the cloud? Right? Are you guys cloud native? Or are you guys cloud hosted? Right? So what we mostly see in our customers is a mixture. We have still the old monolithic applications. We have some distributed applications, and then we're seeing more and more of the hyper distributed applications. And just to round it all off, right, is that we're in an era now where everybody's thinking about developing an ecosystem mindset, right? And that's why observability is really important, because it's no longer really just being about the health of one part or one part of the system, but the entire system as a whole. So, when we're talking about observability, what is it that we're observing, right? We're observing the business. And as businesses becoming more digitized, we feel that observability is going to be a requirement for the digital enterprise. And as part of that, we see businesses really, right, as a complex web of ever-changing services, technologies, and human input that require a shift of focus, right, from caring about the health of a part to really the health of a system, and moving away from SLA to SLOs. So, from Cisco's approach, right, to observability and kind of where all these kind of parts fit in, right, is we look at full stack observability, really taking our traditional, when we talk about full stack visibility, right, that's being able to get metrics and telemetry across the entire stack, from your application to your endpoint, to your network, to the internet, to the data center, to the cloud, right? Taking that visibility and then be able to go and provide insights, right, from the data that's coming out with business context, right? And being able to make recommendations on next steps or actions, or taking actions on your behalf. A great example of what we mean by business context would be, if we bubble up a bunch of alerts, like which one do you think is more important? If your shopping cart is stalled, or is Lester Wong trying to go and update, his picture in the corporate directory, right? So being able to ascertain what is the business relevance and context of, any particular alert or event, and then being able to take action on that. So when we talk about full stack at Cisco right now, full stack observability is a framework solution that we take to our customers. Right now, it's made up of three different parts. We have App Dynamics, which is your APM, with ThousandEyes, which is more of a DEM, so digital experience monitoring, as well as kind of more of I don't want to say NPM, because it's not really just network, but it looks after, it provides visibility on the network, on the internet, on the cloud. And then we also have another product called IWO, which is the Internet Site Workload Optimizer, which is a hybrid cloud visibility and optimization tool. Now, all those you can kind of get on their own, but the real power of it is when you bring them all together. All these tools are closely linked together. You can get a single pane of glass, right, to go and link all this in. And here, I'll give you just a real quick example, right, of where we need observability and where APM on its own just doesn't quite do the trick, right? So if you guys think about a traditional APM, you're monitoring an e-commerce application. You guys have an e-commerce website. At the very end of it, a customer is there. Let's say they're trying to buy something, right? So they're punching in their credit card number and they're clicking confirm to go and make the payment. So they click, and then there's a little spinning wheel. It's just spinning and spinning and spinning. From an APM perspective, what I'm going to see is I'm going to get a big blinking red light that says, this normally should take half a second. It's already taking 2 minutes, right? We have an issue here. But I can see that this is actually the payment provider function that's being invoked. So I can say, hey, this is not an application issue. So if you talk about mean time to innocence, well, that's great. But from a business perspective, we still need to solve the problem. So where like Thousand Eyes kind of plays into this as an example is it'll let us go and troubleshoot and find out exactly where is it along the chain that the problem exists, right? Once the call is being invoked, the question then becomes, is it my router? Is it the MPLS ISP router? Is it the ISP? Is it the hops along the way? Or is it actually the credit card payment provider that's causing the problem and the delay, right? And so traditional APMs wouldn't give you that information. So we're talking about, again, the entire ecosystem, right? That kind of really ties into your business. And better yet, if I was really smart about this, what I would do is I would set up a test with Thousand Eyes that's continuously pinging this credit card provider so that I know if any time that there's a problem, I'm alerted to it right away so I can go and triage it right away, right? Even before the customer goes and runs into their problem. An example of IROL being a resource optimizer would be very, very similar example, right? If I can detect that I'm running low on resources or my applications are starting, or parts of my application are starting to slow down because I'm constrained for vCPU, drive space, etc., right? IROL can help dynamically go and make that change for me automatically without intervention, based on, rules and whatnot. So the idea is to go and automate this as much as possible. Another example is as part of our APM, we have a RASP. And if you don't know what a RASP is, RASP, that's runtime application self-protection. You can think of it as kind of like an IPS for your application. So as an example, like, if you had like Log4j or any kind of like vulnerability you can think of, the idea is not to say, I know that I have this issue and then I have to triage it. The idea with the RASP is that I can actually go and block this runtime in real time as soon as I detect that there's a vulnerability. So our application allows you to go and find out if I have the vulnerability, is the vulnerability being exploited? And if I want, I can block it. So if you think about, something that may be in production, right? How can I block it and triage it? And then I can go and deal with it at the right time. So that, I hope, kind of gives you guys a high level of, kind of what Cisco is doing with full stack observability. We're continually making innovation into this. We're continuing acquiring companies and kind of building this out. There's still a lot more to do, right? Like as we start talking, the ecosystem, there's a big push in the industry right now to go towards open standards, right? With regards to telemetry and logging and whatnot. So, we're big participants and a big believer that open telemetry is really going to be the future for us to go and maintain, context throughout our logging as we kind of help our customers with their observability journey. So all that being said, now I kind of give you guys an update on, kind of the state of the market, what kind of got us here. The question becomes, well, how can we help you introduce observability into your best practice? So we're extremely excited to be partner of Arctic. We think Arctic is uniquely positioned with, an amazing offering, to help improve your DevOps. And more importantly, maybe think about how, like when we talk about observability, is, assessing kind of where you guys are on your journey to observability and how you can kind of insert that into your practice today. So, without further ado, I'll let Dave take this over.
Awesome, thank you, Lester. And my microphone and headset was just clipping a little bit. So if there are any issues with audio, can somebody who has my cell phone number just message me, because I can't see much based on what I'm looking at on the screen right now. Great lead into it, Lester. Thank you so much. My name's Dave Brienne. I'm the COO of Arctic. Before coming to Arctic, and why, you might be thinking to yourself, why am I hearing a COO talk to me about something like observability? Previous to being the COO of the amalgamation of Arctic and Benchmark, I was the CTO of Arctic. But if anybody here knows Shlomo and has spoken to Shlomo, there's a reason Shlomo is the CTO from a technical perspective. He is an unbelievably impressive individual, and the energy that he brings to technology and what he is doing for our team in terms of bettering things like a Cisco partnership, or even going out and having conversations with our clients. He's phenomenal. I moved over into an operations role because I'm running our services delivery organization. And one of the beautiful things about running a service delivery organization built up of elite and hyper elite delivery consultants and delivery engineers is we get to interface with a lot of very interesting problems that a lot of large organizations bring us. And we have some pretty interesting sessions internally where we take our findings internally and we do our retrospectives, and we have our Slack channel set up for technology, different technology areas. And one of the things that often comes up is how much was gained inside of an opportunity or inside of a client site by having a good conversation around observability. And if we look at who we are and what we're doing, Arctic as an organization doesn't just look at what you're doing today and, regardless of how you're operating, try to get you to what we think is a great endpoint or great end state. We're firm believers in this five pillared approach where there needs to be a significant conversation had around what we're doing around each of these areas, right? So from a people, process, security, technology, experience perspective, we model our organization very similarly to how our clients are modeling theirs. And that allows us to have meaningful conversations, because when we're going and talking about training our individuals, and when I'm talking to firms about our own internal digital transformation journey, it rings true with what a lot of people on this call might be dealing with. So whether we're talking to you as someone who's brought in to discuss observability, even if it's something to discuss, one of the children of observability would be considered logging, and a lot of people tie observability to logging. They hear, well, of course I have observability, I have a log server. And really what we do is we help have a conversation around what needs to be communicated so that from an organization, we all understand what observability is, or at least we agree to a common definition. And then more importantly, we understand where we're at today. And then we try and map to where we want to be. And this isn't just going in and installing some technology, going and installing appd and saying, hey, all right, you now have APM. You will never have a performance problem again because now you can see it. Or similarly from the network perspective, from one of the products that we talked about last time, Lester, I can't remember the name of it right now. We can prove out to you based on what's coming back from the clients that our application is doing well. It's actually that individual's network. So we'll see you later. No, really observability, and what Lester was getting to in the preamble was observability is an organizational commitment to understanding what is happening and taking business-related responses to those events as they occur. So in the event, for example, a client hops onto the chat, if you're using Zendesk or using one of the other tools, hops onto a chat with one of your customer service reps and say, my experience is really bad today. What we want to do is we want to measure from whether it's NPS or whether or not we're able to get to ground on that client's complaint quickly. We want to enable the organization from a KPI, from a manageability perspective, to get to ground on why that client's experience is the way it is as soon as possible. And through the tooling that Lester talked about, we have phenomenal visibility from what's happening on that client screen, whether it's a mobile application, whether it's in a single page application or traditional website, all the way through the internet stack to when things are happening on your end. So we can tell you from end to end whether or not this was a slow database query, or whether or not that person's internet at home or between the home connection and the data center, there was an issue. And I think that's a ton of value. There's a bunch of technical implementations and process and monitoring that needs to happen, but that is the field of dreams. That is the ability to go in and say, we've attributed this issue. Here is the root cause of the problem. We are not pointing from issue to symptom to symptom to symptom. We get to go from that issue to root cause extraordinarily quickly. And we're able to do this at Arctic because we are providing consultation services. I'm just going to stop in there. Is my mic cutting in and out? Because I see the mic turning off and on. No? All right. Thank you very much, Lester.
Good. Good.
And we do this through providing conversations around what it is we're trying to do and listening to where you want to be, but also listening to maybe some of the unspoken truths that happen often in the conversations that we're having with your team members And it's always interesting as we repeat things. One of the things that we teach our consultants to do is make sure that they understand echoing back. So if you're in meetings with our consultants or engineers, you'll often hear them say, "What I'm hearing you say is X, Y, Z." Because one of the things that's very, very difficult, and this is a Bertrand Russell quote, I can't remember it perfectly, is one of the biggest challenges with communication is the illusion that it has happened. And I'll say it again, that one of the biggest challenges with communication is the illusion that it has happened. Communication is a two-pronged approach. Something is attempting to be communicated, and hopefully the person or the system that you are communicating with has interpreted it as you intended it to be interpreted. And through effective communication, through working with our consultants, we're going in and understanding where you're at, where you want to be, and putting a plan in place for your team that your team can actually achieve and excel on. We're not going to go in and talk to an organization who has trouble pushing code and they're still doing, for example, from an application development perspective. If we sit with one of your team members and when we're observing them releasing code, if they're logging into a machine through SSH, they're copying and pasting a zip folder and they're unzipping a folder and then they're restarting a server, that's an okay way to release software. It's not how I would want to do it today based on the tooling that's available, but we're going to have a very different conversation with your organization on, what does good look like? What is available out there compared to an organization that is able to release 60, 70 times a day and incur no downtime. There's still conversations to be had with that organization that can release, that is elite at the release perspective. It's just the kinds of conversations that we're going to be having at that level are going to be more about enabling cross-organizational observability. What can we do to help improve action to metric? So what are we going to do around when an issue does happen? How do we tie that issue to a specific release? We're not going to go and have that conversation with the team that's still logging in and SSHing into servers and downloading code from their desktop. Not saying that we would ignore that client who needs that help, because what we do is we go in and through our coaching and guidance, we show what good can look like. And we provide a process where we're introducing as much change as the team can take on, so that we're introducing change, but we're skipping a couple of the steps along the way. Because you don't need to, if you're operating as though you're in 2005, 2010, and that's how software kind of was managed a little bit back then, you don't need to go and deal with all the steps on the subway stop to get to your final destination, which is kind of what that other organization was doing and being able to release 50, 60 times a day. We're gonna help the team understand what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and we only go to the next step when, going back to that communication point I made earlier, when the team is ready to accept the baton. Right? We've seen a lot of organizations come to us and they say, well, we just had some contractors come in, they put in this system, they were supposed to teach us how to become an agile or a safe organization, and we have Jira board, but we're basically doing everything the same way we were before. And that's where when you're engaging with us, we are driving those business outcomes. We're not just in there to install Jira and walk out and say, all right, call yourselves agile, have a great time. Success for us, and one of the things that we've seen with our clients that we are working with a lot, is we try and determine what success means. Success may today mean getting a system into production. And what we try and coach on is success isn't getting something into production. Success should be continuous improvement. So how do we enable ourselves? What do we need to set up? What type of KPIs? What type of conversations do we need to have from an alignment perspective, so that when the application goes into production, that is definitely a good thing. When you get a feature release or you make a change and it gets into production, that's great. But really what we want to be measuring is the intended impact of this change to either to this application or to our infrastructure having the impact that we expected it to. Are we able to measure return on investment? How can we help the business see the value in what we're doing today? And a lot of people think that observability is logging. But the beautiful thing about properly constructed observability is that we can build dashboards to help prove that information out inside of the tooling that Lester was talking about earlier, so that we can immediately determine whether or not the change that we've made is having the intended impact. And that's what observability means. That's what business observability means, and what we can help your team get to. While we go in and have conversations with your teams, one of the things that we've realized is day two operations is very different than when we're going in and doing some training, or compared to hands-on labs training. And what we see here are some of the courses that we offer today. These are courses that we're offering, that we're delivering. The students come in, and after the 2-day course, they're expected to understand and operate everything that we're talking about here. And we're not just saying they're gonna leave the training as a certified master extraordinaire for something like infrastructure as code. What we're gonna enable though is common understanding, a level set on what it is required to do enterprise code at the enterprise level. So how do we effectively deliver change management, change control as part of an observability strategy? How do we operate our Kubernetes environments, our container environments more effectively in line with the observability strategy, in line with digital transformation, by training the team up and making sure that from a vernacular, from a capability perspective, we can 100% say the team has at least been exposed to this level of expertise. That allows us to have certain conversations that we can't have otherwise. Right? We're spending less time explaining what it is we're working on, and we talk more about where it is we want to be. And so oftentimes when we're going in and having conversations with clients, we sometimes say it would be great if you could get your a couple of your key staff trained up to this level before we start our engagement, so that we're not spending our time explaining some of the simpler aspects of some of the technologies, that we can go in and our elite consultants can be leveraged by your team. That's a little bit about who Arctic is and what we're doing, and why we view observability as an important crutch to digital transformation as we do. But really, the impact, the impact can't be measured. That would go completely against the principles around observability. But really, once you get observability built in, and once your organization is aligned with why we want to increase our capability from an observability perspective, all of these little things in the bottom, these icons on the bottom, come into play. So with observability, what does that mean for my governance and security fitness, or compliance and security from a fitness perspective? Being able to have a single area where all of these events and all of the logging is being turned from data into information is critical. Same thing from a continuous verification. You don't want your change manager, your release manager, to be inundated with thousands of alerts that aren't important during a release. Something is going to slip through the cracks. So if we're excelling at observability, people need to see what they need to see when they need to action it. And it's not just about giving them all the things, it's about giving them the important things at that moment. And proper observability and plans around it allows us to do that. And it really does enable that continuous deployment. It enables secure continuous integration. Secure continuous integrations is something that a lot of organizations are challenged with right now. One of the big areas that I had a lot of time and a lot of fun building was an integration solution at Nest Wealth when I was the head of platform and engineering and software engineering at Nest Wealth. And so what we were doing was we created a system that was an integration-based pattern where we would just integrate into whatever book of record, whatever account opening solution that large financial institutions were using. It was a B2B play. It was a very similar to what Wealthsimple was doing in the direct to consumer. I was one of the first folks building this on the B2B side. And we had a lot of instances where, for some reason, not a lot of instances, but we've had some situations where an incident was reported as a result of some flags being hit around baselines of what we had accepted for a critical number of errors. And more often than not, what we observed was, well, one of our partners changed something on their end and maybe neglected to notify us. And that happened a few times, but also a couple other times, we didn't react to their notification. We're all running we're running, complex teams. And sometimes, a patch note doesn't get really read. Sometimes the versioning doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and there were breaking changes introduced. So how do we make sure that from a continuous integration perspective, we have what we need to have so that we can just create it, set up the integration, and continuously improve on it, as opposed to continuously hicking up or getting caught up on some of the changes that the partners are doing. But with proper observability, you're going to know ahead that this is happening. And there are certain technology providers that allow much greater visibility, and this Cisco is one of them. It's why we're here talking today. And the ability to predict that an integration is going to be failing and preventing a deployment from happening is something that Cisco can do that we think is unbelievable with regards to how you can set up your APM from a dev, QA, pre-prod production perspective. And that really feeds into that enhanced change management. Being able to understand what change impacted what performance or what bug or what issue, or even a client logging in and saying, hey, I really like this new feature, rarely happens. We can really tie that change to change control and what we want to do around it from a change management perspective. And then GitOps is something that I think really enables all of this. So if we're looking at infrastructure as code, if we're looking at how we want to make sure that from an organizational change perspective, we are consistent in how we talk about change and how we manage change, the on-demand environment, GitOps, the infrastructure as code, is critical to enabling everything that you're seeing here. So it's very difficult from an observability perspective to track a change in an application to an event that a client is experiencing without having that change event logged in an observable way. And really from an observability perspective, that's what we're talking about. Observability is about logging all of these kind of changes that we're seeing here. From a security perspective, are we okay? Are we observing that we have a green check mark on security and fitness and governance? Are we okay from an integration perspective? Are the systems talking the way they should be talking? From a continuous deployment, can we deploy quickly and not mess up all of the observability? That's critical. And then from a change management perspective, being able to track all that change down to a single piece of code committed through GitOps and through infrastructure as code, that's what this observability is. Observability isn't just APM. It's not, let's send out an alarm when the memory goes to 80% because we know we got to call someone down in the ops department to fire up a couple more VMs, right? And a lot of organizations are operating that way, but you don't have to be. Right, the technology around observability, the processes around observability have gone beyond that, and we happen to be one of the better firms that can talk with your teams, that can bring in proper technology, that can enable from a Cisco perspective, way beyond what you'd be dealing with from a day-to-day from that perspective. And this is where we play. And if you're going to look into this, what you're going to see is basically your entire stack. Right. So what we want to make sure we're doing is having conversations with your team around how do we, and I'm typically told not to go the negative, but when we're talking about observability, typically what we tend to focus on is how do you catch the negative, how do you catch the anomalies? And one of the things that's very difficult in organizations, unless they're set up to do in support of a blameless culture where the entire team, from an application design and marketing perspective all the way down to compute and storage, unless that's a single team, typically what you'll start seeing is when things are going wrong, when anomalies are occurring, finger pointing is going to happen, and finger pointing will happen up and down the stack. The people who first notice, from my experience, It could be different where you're at. Without a ton of observability, typically we start hearing about problems at the top of the stack, right? We start hearing at the application layer. Clients are complaining. We have, a number of errors, maybe, an increase in 500s. We have a gateway timeout, so our client is seeing 504 bad gateway and they don't know what to do with it. And they're yelling at their financial advisor, all things that I've dealt with. And what that does without proper observability is, okay, hunt where the problem is. As I've seen on my team, remember I was the head of platform and software engineering. The application team is going to say it's got to be the infrastructure, right? Obviously, our DevOps team changed something. Obviously, something that, a change that they had made caused this issue. And then the infrastructure team saying, what are you talking about? We didn't change anything. It's got to be something in the application, right? And when we're talking about incident response, those first minutes of trying to figure out what is the symptom and what is the root cause are crucial to how the organization is managing observability. And through proper tooling, through conversations with you and your teams, what we can do is set up those playbooks so that if we do see this, let's go and look at XYZ. That is a reactionary model. That is how a lot of people are working. What having tooling like what Lester was talking about earlier from 1,000 eyes perspective, integrating that information into AppD, that critical, 15 minutes after an incident is called out, the root cause determination is greatly simplified. The more you can consolidate your logging into a single performance dashboard, the better it is, the higher quality of reporting you're going to get, because event correlation is really at the cornerstone of observability. And Cisco, from an event correlation perspective, has been doing it for such a long time on the lower three horizontal bars and your security in your network, and from a compute perspective, that they're also able to extend that up into the application layer. And they've taken those learnings from the traditional Cisco perspective, that a lot of people's nights are made better because they know they bought Cisco and they didn't buy XYZ. Right, the old saying, "No one ever got fired for putting in an Nexus switch." I firmly believe that there's a reason, and Cisco is is only enhancing what AppD is able to do by handling that observability on the top side as well, so that we can go in and we can say, okay, from an application perspective, here's where the slowdown was, here's where we need to focus. Why did this happen? And if we're doing some of the other things, right? So let's say a client is clicking on a button and it's just not logging them in, right? The login button isn't working. Hopefully we're getting an error. We should be seeing something. 1,000 eyes is going to be picking up because it's got the client tracking. 1,000 eyes can also do this thing where, when you get frustrated on a website and you mash it and you mash the button, there's ways to instrument your tooling to not how many frustrated clients are interacting with your website. And anyways, that's an aside. Let's say you're trying to log in and it's not working. Well, that's a complex operation. I don't know everybody personally on the call, but when I hear someone talking about authentication, and maybe you're integrating with Okta, maybe you're integrating with SSO, and you're using Google as your identity provider, login isn't just click a button and a screen shows up. Login is one of the most complex thing an application can do, making sure that from an authorization perspective, or I guess from an authentication perspective, you are who you say you are. So there's the identity proving. And then from an authorization perspective, it's then, okay, you're going to see what we want you to be able to see. In order to make that happen, there's a lot of different steps all along this stack to make it happen correctly. So when there's an issue in login, or when login is slow, troubleshooting that is insanely difficult. Unless you have something like distributed tracing, which AppD does phenomenally well. Distributed tracing is the ability to trace an event all the way through various systems, disparate systems. And in microservices organizations, you're going to hear things like open tracing, trace IDs if you're having those conversations. Open telemetry ties into that as well, so that we can actually trace these events from a network perspective, correlate it up into application events and actually see where that click went along the stack and determine, based on what that trace ID is doing and what's happening, where that trace ID failed. Where did we get an exception? And in properly instrumented events, that is serviced. In the events that some of us are dealing with, we get a call from our superiors around logging. I just logged in today, so what's going on? If you don't have that observability, if you don't have that traceability, that could take hours to days. So your incident response time now is probably going to be extending where you want it to if it is indeed a login issue. And not only that, everything that your team was working on is now shifted from a delivery perspective, because now you're going to need your level 3s and level 4s to go in to address and identify where this root cause is. So the cost to the organization of not having observability is not just all these nice dashboards and being able to prove back to the business, here's how we're healthy and we can prove it. It's also on the opportunity cost of not being able to work on what we want to be working on. Because when something goes wrong, you're not pulling in the summer student, well, hopefully, unless you got some amazing summer students. The people who are going to be coming in to figure out what's going on are your team leads, your high-end architects, and they're not able to do what they need to do because we don't have enough observability. I guess I should have switched to this slide first. This maps what we're talking about, and I've mentioned some of these products a few times, but really what we're talking about is that consistent stack up and down with that AppD and Cisco branding that we are quality around product development and support that we all know and love. So where do you spend your first dollar? You have $100 to spend on IT, and you've carved out $10 that you're going to spend on observability. How do I turn $10 into $20? Well, if you've been watching the market over the last few days, don't put it into Bitcoin, that's for sure. What we would probably advise, though, is to have an understanding of where you're at today. What do we want to do if we're going to be investing in observability? What do we want to call success? So what looks good for you? And where do we want to focus? And Arctic has 3 products that help us determine your maturity model across a couple different areas and where it makes sense for you to start investing inside of your organization, with the goal of increasing observability, with the goal of driving and really getting to ground from a digital transformation perspective, where we want to be. So the DevOps EQ, or DevOps Equilibrium calculator, takes into account things that are attributed to producing change in your environment. So we go in and we say, how effective is your engineering or software development organization? Are your engineers getting enough time to train so that they can come and propose solutions to you? And when they see an issue, they're aware of what's going on from a technical marketing perspective and what they can take advantage of. A lot of times people say, training, you'll get the 20%. Go take your 20, do it at night or do it over lunch. But I think our DevOps Equilibrium calculator can go in and really put to ground where it is your team is spending your time. I think one of the greatest things that I've ever seen come from the results of this is the release manager not realizing the developer toil that was going on during a release and how many people were involved in getting a piece of code from the develop environment up into production. And this quantifies it. It's unbelievable seeing the dollar cost that goes into making change in an environment once it starts being once it's tracked. And DevOps EQ allows us to track that. And similarly across the engineering effectiveness calculator, I think I mixed those up, by the way, where we're talking about from a software development process, which part of the process are we lacking visibility into? Right, observability into the SDLC is unbelievably important in continuous improvement, in CI and CD, but also continuous improvement from an organizational perspective. So when we're looking at a dollar spent inside of understanding where the team is, we're likely beyond, what's breaking, right? So typically what we want to do is if we're going to invest, we need to see what's breaking and where first. the engineering effectiveness is, okay, how effective are we at actually changing that software to prevent that break from happening, or to detect that break earlier. And then the zero trust model is really that's the security-based approach, the zero trust approach that I'm sure a lot of us have heard about, going in and having a conversation around the 8 technology pillars and really getting an understanding and giving your organization an understanding of the maturity model across the zero trust pillars. And really, this is all in support of technology transformation and where we play. So we play a ton across of where we're talking about right now. From a Kubernetes enablement perspective, Arctic's bread and butter since 2015, 2016, when the organization was founded, has been in Kubernetes. And what we're seeing today is the conversations that we're having today are a result of our early investment in becoming a Kubernetes and a container expert consulting organization. So when we were talking about Kubernetes in 2015, 2016, it was, how do we spell it? What is a container? What can we do with it? Why would I want a container? It kind of reminds me of where we were at with VMware, in 2004, 2005, when people were saying, we've had that in, on the Linux side and the Unix side for a while, but that'll never happen on the Windows side. The grains of sand that we were able to manage continue to get smaller and smaller, and the Kubernetes enablement is the next effort in making those grains of sand even smaller. And then from an application modernization perspective, we have a team of software engineers, software developers that can go in and actually have some of those conversations with your teams. When we're talking about observability, sometimes there is code that needs to be modified in order to give us the observability that we want, or to get us the data that we want in order to observe what we want to observe. Our team can help with that. From an AppD perspective, we're talking about maybe modifying a few routes on some important services, maybe not based on what the AppD agent can gather, which is phenomenal based on the open telemetry. We would then maybe have conversations with your team around emitting open telemetry events so that we can take advantage of what AppD can do for you. And then from a cloud security perspective, this is usually where we start our conversations. One of the best things we do is we go in and talk to firms around the OWASP DevSecOps maturity model. And it is a published framework that I recommend anyone to go take a look at. And we can help you get from where you are today to where you want to be to enable this kind of change and have security along for the ride. If you bring security along later, it's going to be tougher. Leading with security conversation always tends to smooth things out. The more, I would say, progressive the thinking is from a leadership perspective. From a data strategy, the biggest topic right now in data is data meshes. You may have heard of security meshes before. Data mesh, very similar. Right? How do we take disparate data sources that will likely never be consolidated and do consolidated information gathering with them? That's something that we have a lot of experience with. Frank Thomas, who's the former CTO of a RubiCloud, which was $1.5 billion acquisition in the Canadian market a few years ago, has a ton of experience around doing this at very large scale for very large data sets. And we're talking, hundreds of millions of events across disparate geographic regions. I strongly recommend having Frank in to have a conversation around that, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. And then really what we're doing is we're mapping what it is we're doing, the conversations we're having, and we can go and have those conversations with your team members, right? Whether it's, whether we're talking to the cloud architects, whether we're talking to application developers, network engineers, obviously these very Cisco deck here, but we have these conversations across enablement, right? How do we enable the network engineer? How do we enable that cloud architect and enable that application developer so that that persona is deriving satisfaction, at least from the tooling that we're putting in front of them, from the processes that we're changing and working with them, and from a training capabilities perspective from those individual personas as well. I'm just clicking through this a little quicker because we are at 11:53 here. And then our technology partner ecosystem, we partner with the best. That's why we're here with Cisco. We get offered a lot of opportunities to partner with a lot of really interesting organizations. I get to pick and choose who we work with because of the longstanding positive relationship we've had with our clients and with our partners. And Cisco is top notch as far as we're concerned. This is what Cisco has been doing and what AppD has been doing is in line from an organizational foundational perspective with how we want to build our relationship with our partners, and how we want to influence change inside of those organizations as well. And again, left this one in here just as a reminder. You know, this is the story. This is where we're playing. This is observability from a full stack perspective. Didn't go too deep into the tooling because as far as I'm concerned, the tooling you can learn about the tooling through something like a proof of concept, which is fine. Really, what we like to do and what we talk about is the proof of value. Okay, if we're going to go in and have a conversation around an assessment, or if we're going to talk to you about AppD or Thousand Eyes, anyone can go in and do the install. What we want to make sure that we do with you is set up our success criteria. Right, getting it installed and seeing flashing lights isn't a success criteria. What we want to show is some use cases around, here's an event that Thousand Eyes captured at the end user, and here's how we correlated it back to some code that was pushed out or a change that was made, so we can prove out that value of identifying root cause within that first 5, 10, 15 minutes. That is where we shine. That is where we go in and have conversations with your team to say, I understand you want to do that. If we do want to get to that level of value, here's the scope of change that we're going to need to be considering. If we just want to see the lights flash and see what it can do for us, we can enable that as well. And maybe the POV is part of a later project, but really it's about driving value, hitting those business outcomes where, you know, the value around proper observability really comes in. And that's everything I had today. Lester, I'll throw it back to you, I guess, for closing comments. If you do have any questions, reach out to your Arctic sales rep, to your AppD reps, your Cisco reps, and we can further some conversations and get to helping each other. Over to you, Lester.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave. That was awesome. And you know, maybe just a quick closing here is, you know, guys, thanks a lot, you know, for spending some time with us today. You know, if you guys want more information, like Dave said, please feel free to reach out to us. Maybe Fred, do you have any comments around the logistics of, you know, kind of getting in contact to talk more about
So
something?
we have a lot of the customer contact information with us as well, but as you know, Dave talked about and showed you the 3 assessments that we do. We certainly are offering you that assessment. We've got 30 days from today to reach out to Scott Cooper, who is on the invitation, and Scott will set up the one of the 3 assessments for you. You know, you can go with 2, you can go with 3, you can go with whichever one you choose, but we are putting it out there because we know what we can bring to the table. And, you know, people like Dave and their team and Lester and their team have a really good handle on these assessments and how they can help you in the longer term, you know.
Great. Thanks a lot, Fred. So everyone, give you back 3 minutes. Thanks so much for your participation today. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good weekend, folks.
Thanks.
All right.